What's up, everyone? Armitage here, and it feels like it's been forever. The break leading up to Worlds has left me feeling like I've lost something in myself, but I'm super excited for October. With that said, I'm also really excited to show you the contest we're running for the group stages of Worlds to start off with. So let's get started. So here we are on AlphaDraft. I'm going to select League of Legends. It should be the top entry, and it's called the Free Worlds $5,000 20 entry giveaway. If the name doesn't give away enough, every entry is free. You can enter 20 times with 20 different teams, which I highly recommend because in our last contest, someone placed first and took home $500 absolutely free. As I said before, this is only for the group stages. We'll have plenty of contests for the knockout stages, finals, semifinals, etc. And we'll have contests for each day. This particular contest is slightly daunting considering how many teams are going to be playing, but that's what I'm here to help with, so let's get into it. All right, so the first thing we want to do is figure out who is playing. And I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to figure out who's playing by scrolling through all of these sometimes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that there's so many teams playing that I like a better visual representation. So we're going to open up our favorite website here, eSportspedia, and they already have Worlds 2015 ready to go. So we're going to click on that. And we're going to scroll a little bit, and here we go. These are the group stages for Worlds. You can see that there are 4 groups and 4 teams in each group. For this contest, it should be known that you're not going to worry about the knockout stage. So you're only worrying about the teams that play each other in each group. And the most important thing to know is that each team plays each other twice. So for example, SKT will play H2K twice, they will play EDG twice, and they will play Bangkok Titans twice. Meaning their best record could be 6-0 and their worst record could be 0-6. But we know that's not going to happen. All right, so now that you know how the group stages work, I've written a couple notes that I'm going to put up on the screen to kind of guide us in the right direction in picking optimized rosters for this contest. So the first thing I came up with was that we should try to prioritize winners in each group. It's not 100% true that the person that gets first place could have the most points, but in an ideal situation, or most likely, they will have the most points. For example, if SKT 6-0s, that means that no other group team in this group can be higher than 4-2. So that's really important to note. My second point, however, is slightly contradictory to my first point in that 2 teams could go 5-1. So you could choose EDG, they can go 5-1, and then SKT, and they can go 5-1. Both losing to each other once. Now, that means that you can't exactly predict who's going to score the most points, but when you're building rosters, especially with a limited entry of 20, and you're trying to get first place against a lot of people, you want to try to prioritize and optimize best possible teams for all 20 slots that you can fill. With that said, when you're trying to decide on which teams can score the best, you also want to figure out who fights the most. For example, if we were to look at Group B, Cloud9, if Cloud9 goes 5-1, I could easily see them having less points than a team like AHQ, because AHQ tends to fight more than Cloud9 if they both ended at 5-1. So keep that in mind when building rosters. And my last thing is to optimize rosters by filling with one team from one group and then choosing teams from another group. And I'm going to go into this in a little more detail later, but for now, just include that in your list of what you want to do to optimize your rosters. All right, so now that we have these guidelines when deciding on what teams to choose, we're going to follow our typical strategy when building 20 rosters. And you can find more information on that in depth here in my Mastering the Tournament series. All right, so let's open Notepad like we normally do. So I think the first place we want to start is to write down the teams that we think are going to get first place in each group. So let's keep this easy. Let's say we think KU is going to get first place in Group A. We think Fnatic is going to get first place in Group B. SKT for Group C. And let's just say KT for Group D. And then I want to go back to each group and write down one team from each group that I think is going to fight a lot, even though they could have a record of 3-3 or 4-2, excuse me, or anything like that. So let's go back to Group A. What team from Group A outside of KU do we think can score well and still have a decent chance at winning? I'm going to put Flash Wolves from Group A. I'm going to put IG from Group B, EDG from Group C, and LGD from Group D. So basically what I've gone through and done is selected the teams that I think can get first and second, or the teams that I can get first and the most points, not necessarily just getting second. Because, for example, IG could go 4-2, and AHQ could go 3-3 and still outscore IG and their loss. So keep that in mind. All right, so we have our 8 teams that we think are going to score well or win. This is just an example, so please don't build all of your rosters out of these 8 teams. Use that as your own discretion. Read my articles, read other articles, and you figure out who you think is best to pick from each group. Now, I want to go back to that point that I made earlier regarding choosing teams from different groups. Now, because we only have 20 entries, we want to try to maximize our chances at building the best possible team. So if we think that SKT is going to go 6-0 in their group and Fnatic is going to go 6-0 in their group, it's highly likely that SKT is going to have a higher score than the rest of the people in their group, and it's highly likely that Fnatic is going to have a higher score than the rest of the people in their group. So what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't want to build a roster with SKT at 6-0 and EDG at a maximum of 4-2, mainly because I'm trying to optimize to the best of my ability, meaning it's still possible that a team roster with SKT and EDG gets first place, but it's very unlikely as comparison to SKT going 6-0 and Fnatic going 6-0 and you filling with a roster full of SKT and Fnatic. All right, so with that said, just remember you don't have to follow it strictly, mainly because if you think that SKT is going to go 5-1 and EDG is also going to go 5-1, I could easily see that roster having more points than a roster full of SKT and LGD. So like I said, you don't want to follow it strictly, but you want to keep it in mind. If you think that a team out of a group is easily going to 6-0, such as Fnatic in my opinion, I think they have the highest chance of 6-0ing their group, then I would follow that and pretty much not take people in their group besides Fnatic, mainly because the best record that the person could have if a team 6-0s is 4-2. So just keep that in mind. All right, so the first thing I do before I start building teams out of these is look at salaries, just to get a good idea of who's cheap, who's expensive out of my list here. So let's go back here. Okay, so the first thing to note is obviously Ku is quite expensive. So knowing this, you're going to have to realize that you probably cannot build a roster with just Ku, considering if I built 4 people from Ku, I could only spend up to $4,000 per person, which just isn't possible. So that's something we want to note when we're building teams using Ku, is that we probably can only fill like 1 or 2 people maybe from Ku. And the same could be said for CLG, who's also pretty expensive. Some other things I'm noting is that SKT is actually very well costed, and so is Fnatic. The fact that Huni is only 7,900 and Faker is only 8,500. These are all things you want to note or remember when you're building your teams. Is you can tell that some of these people are undercosted, in my opinion, and some of them are overcosted for their groups. So this is the kind of stuff you might want to write down. So for example, you could put SKT undercosted, and you could put Ku expensive. I don't want to use the word overcosted because they are projected to score very well, but they're still very expensive. So you can know that you can't build teams with just Ku in them and another team. All right, so with that said, let's jot down some teams really quick. Now remember, let's go back to our groups. I'm going to try to build teams that don't have rosters filled with teams from the same group. So let me write down some really quick. So let's see. We could do Fnatic, SKT. We could do Fnatic, Ku plus something because they're so expensive. We could do Fnatic. All right, so this is a couple teams I came up with really quickly. And remember that you want to go through and try to take the teams that you think are going to score the highest and then fill with the other teams you're going to score the highest. All right, so you can see I've only written down 10 teams, but there's plenty of other teams you could build. I haven't built a single team with IG. I haven't built any teams with Flash Wolves. Oh, I did build one, but You can basically fill up 20 rosters really quickly using this method. So the next thing you want to do is figure out how you want to build those teams. Meaning you would go back here and let's say I wanted to build an EDG team. I'm going to pick Deft, Pawn, Clearlove, and Mako. And then I want to fill with SKTs. So Marin, let's take SKT's team. And it looks like we probably don't have enough for anyone else in SKT. All right, we don't. So this is where you have to start playing with things. We could drop Pawn and take Faker, and we can try to cut some salary elsewhere. I'm not really going to go into depth on who you should pick for every team that we made, but if you need help picking an optimized roster, you should check out the Master and Tournament series for optimizing your roster right here. Also, don't forget I'll be writing articles for each group stage that should help you pick which players to emphasize and help you choose the best teams that I think are going to score the most or do the best in each of their groups. All right, so I have one last tip before we end, and it's kind of contradictory to what I was saying in my list of tips. And the reason I'm keeping it at the end is it's because I'm going to let you choose how you want to try to win this contest. The thing about this contest is it's going to have thousands of entries. So you kind of need to separate yourself from the rest of the group so you can try to get first place. That means that you probably don't want to build a bunch of rosters with just SKT and Fnatic or SKT and LGD, mainly because those are all teams that people are going to make. Everyone knows that the favorite in Group C is SKT or EDG. Everyone knows that the favorite in Group B is Fnatic. So knowing that information, you know that there's going to be a lot of teams with Fnatic and there's going to be a lot of teams with SKT. So what I'm trying to say is if you end up building a roster filled with a team that is an underdog, for example, Cloud9 in their group, and they actually end up doing really well, you have a much higher chance of getting first place above a lot of people because most people aren't going to build teams with Cloud9. So that way, in the event that your long shot choice does do well, you'll have a really good chance at beating everyone else. And like I said, I know this somewhat contradicts what I said earlier, but it's merely your choice on how you want to try and win. Considering this contest is completely free, you have nothing to lose. So it might be worth it or behoove you to build 20 rosters with a bunch of underdog teams, hope one of them does well, and then you have a much higher chance of placing first over most of the rest of the people that join the contest. All right, so that's pretty much it. I hope this helps you understand some basic strategy when it comes to winning a contest like this one. I should be creating a bunch of content for Worlds, so look out for that in the future.